Hi there, my name is Chris Rathbone. I'm a freelance illustrator. I've been using Affinity Designer for several years now, and I use it to create an awful lot of my project work. Some of you may have seen my video tutorial I did last year that was created on the desktop version with Affinity Designer. That was how to create speed and motion in an illustration. Today I'm going to be bringing you a new tutorial video. I'm going to be creating an illustration purely on the iPad Pro, and we're going to be creating a portrait illustration. So let's get into the video, and I hope you enjoy. So we're going to go ahead and set up a new artboard. Now obviously you can set this to any size that you want depending on the job that you're doing. For this exercise I'm just going to set up a A4 print document. So once we set that up, it obviously brings up our artboard. And today we're going to be working from a stock image which has been supplied to us by Affinity. So I'm going to set up a new layer here and call that reference. And this is where we're going to import our image into to work from. So I'm now going to go ahead and import the image. And we're only going to be focusing on the head and neck of this guy. So I'm going to bring the image in, I'm going to rotate it slightly so that the head is straight, and I'm going to create a quick clipping mask. So we just have the head to work from, and you can do that very easily by dragging your shape down onto the layer that you want to create a clipping mask of, and it really intuitively creates that clipping mask for you. So now we can go ahead and just scale the head up within our artboard, rotate it again ever so slightly just to make sure it's straight, and we're going to set the opacity of this to about 50% just so that we can see what we're doing when we're drawing. So now we've got a reference layer. I'm going to go ahead and lock that just so we don't accidentally draw on that layer and edit it. And I'm going to set up a new layer. And this is going to be our line work layer where we're going to produce our drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer quickly. So now we have that layer, and you'll see that layer is set up above our reference image. So anything we draw onto this layer is going to appear above our reference image. Now I'm going to start off just by using the shape tool to create a couple of dots for the pupils of the eye, and then the majority of the rest of the drawing is going to be done using the pen tool and the pencil tool. So I've set up the shape here for the pupil. Just going to duplicate that, and by holding your finger on the screen and dragging the shape across, we can quickly duplicate that. But before we do, I don't know if you saw my first video where we spoke about the global colors. So we're going to set up a global color, which is going to be this black color that we're going to use for all of our line work, and we'll come on to global colors a little bit later, but for now we're just saving ourselves a lot of hassle further down the line when we come to change the colors. So now I've got the pupil and I'm happy with that. I'm now going to start using the pen tool and the pencil tool to start drawing my line work. Now for the time being I'm not going to worry too much about the strokes and the brushes, because again we can do that in bulk later on in the illustration. So for now I'm just going to keep fairly simple, just a 1 pixel thick unweighted line just to construct our illustration. So by putting our finger on the screen as we click and drag, we can duplicate this selection over here to make sure that the pupils and the eyes are the same size on both sides of his face. And I'm really just going to continue drawing around the detail of his face. Now one of the important things to do here, or one of the things that I like to do, is you'll notice I'm not going to intentionally join that path up. I'm going to make sure that the line finishes short. Now one of the reasons for doing that is when we start applying our brush strokes to our line weights later on, it gives a really nice effect to have these finished lines as if you've drawn it by hand rather than having the shapes completely filled up. So I'm just going to go around here, continuing around, pulling out some of the lines in the creases of his eyes and around the eyes themselves. And now I'm going to draw around the frames of the glasses. Now I mean obviously we are working from a reference image, you want to try and be as accurate as you can. But it's not the end of the world if your lines don't line over the drawing perfectly. Don't spend too much time going back and forwards wondering and worrying that it's not as accurate as it should be. Because obviously once we apply brush strokes to this and our shading, the line work almost kind of gets lost within the illustration. It's very easy to focus too much on the line weight sorry, on the lines themselves in these early stages, where the lines are ultimately the only thing on the page. So just try and follow it as closely as you can, and don't get bogged down too much with worrying about it being pinpoint accuracy around the image below. So here we go, we finished all of our line work. As you can see, the line work itself is pretty basic and not very interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select all the line work. We're going to deselect the two fill colours that we got for the pupils in the eyes, because obviously they're not strokes. We don't want to apply any effects to those. So now all we've got selected is our line work. Now we can go up here into the stroke pop out. And one of the cool things in Affinity is you can adjust this curve to basically apply a thickness and a line weight to your strokes. Now, I like tapering it off at both ends, so it creates a really sort of hand-drawn effect, which looks really nice and makes the lines a lot more interesting than just a line that has a consistent weight all the way through. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick some of these lines as well. So at the moment everything is the same weight. So we're going to pick some of these strokes and we're going to increase the weight of them to add some weighted line to our drawing. Generally I try to focus on lines that are around the edge of objects. So for example, you can see here around the edge of his hair, around the rim of the glasses, around his jawline, and around the edge of his ears as well. So what that does is it puts some weight to our drawing. So now we have our line work set up. I think that's looking really cool. I'm really happy with how that's coming together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start inking. So I'm going to lock this layer and we're going to set up a new layer above our line work. Now this layer is going to be our inking layer. So we're going to call it inking. And what we're going to do on this layer is, using that same black that we've used for our line work, we're going to start creating some of the heavy inking areas on this illustration. So for example, I'm going to start off around here around the eye. So obviously he's got some eyelashes around here, and using again a combination of the pen tool and the pencil tool, I'm going to go around the eye here and start filling in some of these details that are going to be in blocks of colour to support and complement my line work. So we'll go into the eye here as well. At the moment that's just set to a stroke, so we're just going to invert that and turn it into a fill. And again, we're using our global colours here, so we can change these colours at a later stage. And you can see we're starting to add some more depth now to this line work. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop this inking layer below my line work. And I'm going to continue around here, just pulling out some of the heavy details, almost the really dark shadowed areas from the image. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up. It's pretty self-explanatory again. So now we've got our line work and our inking, and I'm really happy with how this is looking. I think we've got some good depth to our illustration. So we're going to go ahead and ditch our reference image now, because we don't need that anymore. I'm happy that I've got an accurate drawing based on the photo below. So we're going to lock that layer. Now we'll come back to this later, but what I was mentioning with the global colours, you'll see this is all set up as a global colour. So what that enables us to do is we can now edit this colour up here, and it changes every instance of where that colour is used throughout our drawings. This is one of the benefits of the global colours. Like I said, we'll come to this later on in much more detail once we've got our drawing complete, but it just gives you an idea of how it's set up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up a second global colour, which is just going to be a bit lighter, a lighter shade of black than our inking layer. And we're going to set a new layer up, and we're going to call this shadows. And we're going to set this layer below our inking and below our line work, so we'll move it to the bottom. And what we're going to do now is we're going to pick our own light source. So for this instance, I've picked a light source coming from the top left corner of this image. So everything that would be below that would have a shadow cast on it. So I'm just going to go around, and it's not an exact science. This really sort of comes with experience and just playing around to see what you think is working. But I'm going to start pulling out some shadowed areas in here. Now generally speaking, where we've got our inking and our line work, the shadowed areas are going to be below those lines, because that's obviously where our shadow is going to be cast. So again, I'm using a combination of the pen tool and the pencil tool. One of the things that's really cool in Affinity Designer is you can switch between those two. So you can start drawing a path with the pen tool, and then if you want to go into a more jaggedy and hand-drawn path, you can continue that same path with the pencil tool and then jump back into the pen tool. So it's really handy for doing this kind of work. So once again, I'm going to speed up the video here. I think you can see what I'm doing, and then we'll have a time lapse of all the shadowed areas put onto the illustration. So we've got our shadows completed here on this layer. I'm just going to zoom out so we can have a look, and I think that's looking good. So as you can see, the shadows on the right hand side of the face are slightly heavier than the shadows on the left hand side of the face, because the left is where our light source is going to be coming from. So I think this is looking good. Obviously there's a lot more work to do, so what we're going to do now is we're going to set up another layer, and we're going to call this one low lights. And this is really going to be an extension of our shadows. So our shadows are quite the tight, close shadows that are the heavy areas of shading on the image. Low lights is going to be a much larger, softer group of shadows on here. So I'm going to set up a new global color again, and again just go slightly lighter than my color before. So you can see our 3 colors that we've got set up there now. And I'm just going to go around in exactly the same technique as I did for the shadows, but I'm going to use the pen and the pencil tool again to create a second layer of shadows. Now when I'm doing these shadows, and also when I'm doing the lighting, which we'll come to in a little while, I try not to have really definitive block shapes, because if you imagine this, obviously a person's face has many different contours and levels to it, so you're not going to get solid shapes of shading and of light. So I just try and be a bit jaggedy and a bit rough with this. You can always go in and fine tune some of your lines if some of it's not working, but I find that gives a more natural feel rather than working in solid blocks. So as you can see around the eye here, I've got some sharp bits, almost kind of, because we don't use gradients in the vector work, it's almost creating a softer edge, as you can see in here as we go around, rather than just having that as a solid shape. So it gives more of a natural blend between our colours. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed up the video, and we'll see you when the lowlights are complete. So what we're going to do now, we've finished our lowlights, and what we're going to do now is we're going to set up a new layer. This is probably our easiest layer that we're going to create today. I'm going to call it color. And here we can see our illustration, which has got our inking and our line work. We can see we've got our shadows, and we can see we've got our lowlights. We're just going to drop this new layer behind this color layer. So it's essentially at the bottom of our illustration at the moment. Now I'm going to go ahead again, continuing the theme of the global colors. I'm going to create a new global color in here. And once again, I'm going to create it just a little bit lighter than our lowlights layer. So go over mid-gray. And what we're going to do now, the color is essentially the flat color for the whole illustration. So what we're going to do now is, again, using a combination of the pen tool and the pencil tool, we'll lock all the layers above it just so that we don't accidentally draw on the wrong layer. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to draw around our whole image. So we're going to draw around the glasses around here, go down and basically outline the whole head and neck of the guy. So now we can see we've got our base color in behind our shadows, in behind our lowlights and our inking, and you can see how this illustration is starting to take shape now. It still looks a little bit flat because we haven't got any highlights or lighting on it yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up a new layer now above our shadows and above our lowlights, but still below our inking layer, and we're going to call this highlights. And essentially using the same process that we did for our shadows and our lowlights, bearing in mind that we still want our light source to be coming from the left hand side. Using a combination of the pen tool and the pencil tool again, we're going to go through and just draw some highlighted areas. So we're going to get our global colors set up with a slightly lighter shade than we previously used for our base color. And we're going to go around in the same way and just pick out some highlights. So again, the top left hand side of his forehead here is going to be picked up. If there was an imaginary light source above it, that'll be picked up in the same way that we've got a slight shadow on the right hand side of his forehead. We're going to create a light source on the left hand side. So again, I'm trying to avoid just using definitive solid lines so that we get more of a softer blend with our shadows and our highlights, and that the colors transition from one to another slightly softer rather than being with just a solid edge. So once again, using my global colors, just a slightly lighter shade than the previous shades, and we can play around with these global colors at the end of our illustration. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and speed up the video so you can see the highlights. So we finished all of our highlights there, and again you can see that this is really starting to come to life now. Add some depth and an element of 3D to this drawing so it no longer looks flat and static. So in the same way that we had two layers for our shadows, we had our shadows and our lowlights, we're going to apply the same approach with our lighting. So we've got our highlights, and now what we're going to apply is a layer called glows, and this is going to be our really strong lighting, which is going to complement our really dark shadows that we put on our first layer. So once again, set up a new global color. And this colour is going to be almost white, not quite white, and I'll explain why in a little while, but we want to go pretty light with our colour for this one. And in the same way, using the same tools and techniques as we've used for our previous layers, we're going to go through just working within our highlights area, obviously on our glows layer, but within this highlighted area, because obviously all the immediate glows are going to be within the highlights themselves. So we're just going to pick areas within this area that we really want to pull out to make it pop with a lighter shade. So again, keeping a jaggedy edge so that we get more of a transition between those colours rather than just solid shapes, which can look a bit flat and boring. Just pulling out certain bits, so again the little bits in the whites of his eye. And again, remembering that on the right hand side, although there still will be some highlights on that side of the face, there's going to be a lot less than there is on the left hand side of his face, where we have our light source coming from the left. So I'm just going to pick up a few areas in the nose here, and once again I'll just speed up the video for time purposes. So I finished our glows layer. Just going to move that back up above the highlights layer and lock it so we don't accidentally edit that layer on the next stage. Now we're pretty much done with our lighting and shadows. What we're going to do is we're just going to set up one final layer, and this is just a quick layer here, and we're going to call this rim lighting. Now rim lighting is basically, if you imagine this light source in real life, even if the light source was behind him, it would be picking up just the edges of his face and the edges of the ears, because ultimately in real life he is a three-dimensional object, so there would be some lighting just glancing off the edges of his face and his ears. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to pick up, and this is quite a subtle approach, we don't need very much on here, and it really is just sort of trial and error. Once again, we're going to set up our final global colour. And this one is going to be pure white, which is the reason why we didn't set our previous layer to pure white. We wanted it just a little bit darker. And I'm just going to pull out really just 2 or 3 places around the sides of his face where light would be catching the edge. So for example, around his jawline here, around the edge of the ear, which you just saw me do. And we'll put these in the pure white. And you can see it just helps to lift him off the page. And when and if we come to put a background on this image, these rim lighting areas will really help him stand off of the background. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of bits, mainly around the jaw and around the ears. So with all our shading and lighting done, we're really on to the finer details now. So I'm going to go ahead and lock my previous layers. And we're going to set up a new layer, which is going to be at the top. And this is going to be where we're going to put all of our fine detail on there. So we're going to call this layer detail. And what we're going to be using now is the brush tool and a little bit of the pencil tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to go around some of the areas where the hair, the eyebrows, the beard, and we're going to put in some fine line work in there to really help those areas pop and add some 3D to the image. So what we're going to do here is, using the brush editor, I'm going to apply some size variation. And what you can see here, if you put it to a low number, you get very minimal variation to your line stroke. But if you put it up to 100%, that means you go from effectively a very, very fine line up to as thick as it can be and back down. Now, using the controller, we're going to set that to pressure. So what that means is the harder we press our pencil, the thicker the line is going to be. Now what we're going to do on this detail layer, the essential part here is to make sure that we're still using, for every single brush stroke that we do, we need to be making sure that it is one of our global colours. So obviously we can use the lighter ones for lighter areas and the darker ones for darker areas, obviously. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to start with the darker areas. So I'm going to use the black from our inking layer. Just going to make some adjustments to the brush here to give it a nice even curve. And then using the black from our inking layer, I'm just going to apply some brush strokes into this area here. So you can see it just almost as if you're drawing in individual hairs. Now, these don't have to be too precise, and obviously by having the pressure controller on our brush, it means you're naturally going to get some variation in the thickness of these lines as well, which is quite nice and gives it more of a realistic feel. So I'm going to start off by using the black line, just adding in some fine detail in here. Again, you don't have to go too heavy with it, you don't have to go too over the top, because it really is just extra detail. And I'm going to do something here on the eyebrow as well. And now what I'm going to do is, just using some of our other colours and other shades that we've got built up, I'm just going to apply some more hairs and some detail around here. So using our light colour, where we've obviously got a dark area underneath his chin, it's hard to see the difference between the actual hair on his chin and the shadow that's being cast on his neck. So by using these lighter brushes, you can really just put a couple of brush strokes in there that really help just contrast the chin and the hair from the neck. And using some of the lighter brush strokes just in here as well, which helps transitions out some of those solid areas of colour that we've got. So once again, I'm going to speed up the video here. I'm just going in, applying the different colours, getting a nice contrast, and I'll go in and do the same for the hair on the top of the head as well. Now, one of the very last things I'm going to do here is, obviously where our model is wearing glasses, there's obviously glass in those frames, and the glass is going to be catching highlights and reflections as well. So I'm just going to very quickly draw a shape in here which kind of looks like it's following the curvature of the glass on each of these lenses. And I'm going to set the opacity to about 50% because obviously we still want all of our nice detail that we've drawn, particularly in the eyes, to be coming through those glasses. And obviously where it is glass, you would be able to see through it naturally anyway. And I think that adds a really nice depth to the illustration. It helps the glasses feel like they are raised off of his face. Obviously we want this to feel as three-dimensional as possible. And one final thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to create a new layer called background, BG for background, and I'm just going to send this to the very bottom of our illustration, and I'm just going to do a very minimal and simple circle background. Now again, holding your finger on the screen as you're drawing keeps the shape in proportion. I'm just going to position it behind his head, and again make sure that it's one of our global colours. So I'm going for one of the mid shades here. And what you can see is having that circle behind really helps the guy's face and head pop off from the background. Now we're almost done with our illustration. I'm really happy with it. I think it's looking great. One of the reasons for working in grayscale is you can really build up the depth in the illustration and make sure that the image has got the right depth to it, a nice contrast, without getting too bogged down with colour, which is easy to do. If you start playing around with colour too early on in the drawing, you can find yourself getting really bogged down. So it's nice to build it up in grayscale. I use this approach for nearly all of my work. And then I come and play around with the colours at the end. Now because we set up those global colours that we've mentioned several times throughout this video, what you can see now is I can start to play around with these colours independently, and it adjusts all instances of where that colour is used in the illustration. So it's a super quick and handy approach to have. And also if you're setting work up for print and suddenly a client comes back and wants to tweak one of the colours, or there's some issues with a particular colour, or you need to set it up as a Pantone, or whatever the approach may be, it just gives you a lot of flexibility to go through and do this approach and play around with the colours. So I've ended up going with this kind of yellow, orange and pink palette, which I think is really strong. So I've dropped a quick background colouring behind our coloured circle as well, and that really brings to the end this tutorial. I mean, I'm really happy with the finished result. I think the colour looks great. It looks really exciting and energetic with the colours here, and I look forward to seeing your results. Thanks so much for following along, and see you soon.